Yeah. Well, here
Oh,
comes Lori. Hi, Lori. She's connecting. She's still connecting, so give her a second.
that's fine.
Hi, Lori.
Hi.
We
Hi,
are just
Laura.
getting started. I don't know how many people, we did this kind of last minute, and I know Thursday nights, sports and things going on, kind of busy time. So we're going to record the beginning of Reagan's presentation that kind of goes through what she's doing with pressing on. And then if questions want to come up afterwards, I'll turn the record off, and then people can ask questions to Reagan as far as what she's done, or just her transplant journey with her daughter. So
Oh,
I'll let Reagan start.
Sounds good. Thank you. Thanks for having me. My name's Regan Reeder. I'm actually using a presentation that I used a few months ago for a group of research doctors and nurses and dietitians who are doing some research on MMA, which is my daughter's condition. So I don't normally like introduce myself and my title like this, but I'm just using that one again today. So I am a special education teacher by trade. This is my 16th year with the same school district teaching special ed, other than a couple years that I took off because of my daughter's health needs. I always say I'm like we all are, we're non-certified nurses. We certainly don't have all of the official training, but we have plenty of on-the-job training. So my most famous title is probably Micah's mom. So my daughter Micah is my kiddo with methylmalonic acidemia. So let me go back and just kind of tell our story a little bit. So Micah was born on January 30th of 2015. I had a totally normal pregnancy, nothing before her birth. I have an older daughter as well who is not diagnosed with MMA. So we had no idea that we were genetic carriers for this. On day 3 of life, she went into a severe metabolic crisis with an ammonia level of 1300 when she was transferred from our local hospital down to another hospital that had a NICU. And before we even got to that hospital, they had moved her to Children's Hospital of Pittsburgh, which we're grateful for. They saved her life. She was put on dialysis with a very unknown outcome because of obviously how high her ammonia level was, but she survived. And she was diagnosed with methylmalonic acidemia and had a G-tube placed at 2 weeks old. Right then in the NICU, I heard about the Organic Acidemia Association, I think within 24 hours of her birth. And I'll be honest, it took me a couple of weeks to get on the website and start to like kind of process what life might look like and what this might mean and just how much that initial crisis was, how traumatizing it was and everything like that. So but it's been so wonderful to be connected with the OAA because it's just a group of people who I always say we don't totally understand each other, but we can relate to one another in a way that no one else can because we live it day out. So another thing discussed for us in the NICU was liver transplantation. As we know, liver transplant isn't a total cure for MMA, but because of how severe her initial onset was and being in Pittsburgh, which is one of the liver transplant country, they really started kind of putting that in our minds and talking about it when she was just a couple of weeks old. So life with MMA, we quickly realized that the dietitian was going to be on our recent contact list and was a vital part of our day-to-day life. as you guys probably know, it's a lot of mixing formulas and pumping breast milk and using the G tube and unclogging the G tube and dosing meds and never sleeping. I was pumping every 3 hours for, I think, 7 or 8 months. And I remember being like connected to my double pump and feeding her at the same time and thinking, I'm just like a cow now. And this is my life. And but you do whatever you have to for your baby and to help them be healthy. So Micah had blood work every 2 months, or I'm sorry, every 2 weeks for months, and then monthly and every 2 months from 2015 to 2017 prior to transplant. Part of the issue that Micah had was that she, as a lot of our kids are, was such a hard stick for blood draw. And it was so frequent, and she had so many hospitalizations that we actually had a med port placed to assist with blood draw, which did not go well for us. She had one that clogged, a second one put in, which developed into a staph infection, and she became septic in May and June of 2016. And looking back, I think it was that time that we decided it was time to move forward with transplant. We had really been back and forth. We had consulted with Dr. Venditti at the NIH. We had shared all of her records with him. We had a big phone meeting. I remember, right, where I was sitting talking to him and Dr. Manoli and all of the people, and just seeing what their opinion was. Trading one, not even trading, but adding another massive chronic thing to her plate. And they had no hesitation in recommending that we go to Stanford or Pittsburgh and that we proceed with liver transplant to hopefully preserve her kidneys as long as possible. So that septic issue that we had with her and how very sick she was, we actually went the week after we were discharged, we were rated for transplant. So another big part of our story is my other daughter, Olivia, who's now almost 12. So these are old pictures, but as you guys know, the journey of whatever metabolic condition and transplant is a family affair. So I never want to totally leave Olivia out because she's very integral in our story as well. And then the journey to transplant, genetics brought up transplant at every single appointment. And sometimes I hated them for it. It was just so heavy and so terrifying. And I felt like we were barely surviving the way that it was, that thinking of transplant, it was just scary. It was just another incredibly overwhelming thing to try to process. But we did proceed with pre-transplant eval in June of 2016. She was officially listed in July of 2016 and then was bumped to status 1B in September. Not even 2 weeks after she was listed, we got the first call for transplant. And I remember like the floor giving out under me. My stomach was just in knots. I couldn't believe it because I was so unprepared. They had very much prepared us that it would be a long time. And so before we had even pulled out of the driveway, we got a call that it had fallen through and that we could unpack. My husband had flown home from work and we called the grandparents and like all the things were happening. But that one didn't work out. We actually had 2 more calls in November of that year. Both of those times, Micah had a fever within 24 hours and was fighting, how they are. They all these fevers and illnesses. So we had to pass on those livers. And then we got the call on January 6th of 2017. It was about 5:30 and they told us to head down around 11 o'clock that night. So her transplant was on January 7th of 2017. So she spent 3 weeks in the PICU on a ventilator with a lot of post-transplant complications, which made me second guess our decision every second of the day. She had hepatic artery thrombosis and was almost retransplanted. She became really addicted to the pain and sedation meds in the PICU and went through very serious drug withdrawal, which led to her being intubated even longer. She celebrated her second birthday Minnie Mouse style in the PICU and was then moved to the transplant unit And the night before we were supposed to come home, 6 weeks after transplant, my husband called me. I had come home to get the house ready and cleaned up, and Micah had aspirated vomit and was re-intubated and moved to the PICU the night before discharge. So then she was thankfully okay and came home a few weeks later on March 1st. So we were in for a couple of months at that point. I guess my story for transplant is just that it's a roller coaster. There were so many labs and biopsies and rejection and drains for bile duct issues that a lot of people don't experience, but we felt like the doctor said Micah was checking off potential complications like one by one by one. For that first year, year and a half, they weren't able to close her stomach either at the time of transplant. So she was totally open for almost a week. And then they were able to close her skin, but she had this cute little pot belly for, is my picture covering up her pot belly picture? Or can you see it? You can see it? Okay. So they had to do the abdominal closure surgery then in the fall of 2018. About 18 months later, they had to close her actual abdominal muscles. So for 18 months, I had a 2-year-old on steroids who had no abdominal wall. And they were like, if she even just trips and falls down, you need to bring her in for a CT scan. So that was a long 18 months with just managing everything with medicine. She came home on blood thinner shots. But the best part of that year was seeing her start to eat so much by mouth. Pre-transplant, she was so protein restricted and mostly tube fed. And so she started eating so much more by mouth and just slowly regaining strength. So that was good. Huge part of our transplant story, and I'll probably cry, is Micah's donor. Her name was Ashley. We have gotten to meet her family. Ashley was the middle sister. That's a picture of her on her wedding day in the middle there. And then we got to meet them a couple years later, and there's Micah in the middle of the two sisters at the bottom. But she passed away at 3:55 on Thursday, January 5th in Washington, D.C. after a massive stroke. She had a very unknown, undetected weakened artery and went for a run, as she did every day, and collapsed from a massive stroke when she got home. Her and her husband were planning to start a family that year. So obviously a huge loss for them. She was an incredible woman. She served in the Peace Corps. She was a published travel writer. She spoke multiple languages. They say Micah has like the most well-traveled liver because Ashley traveled to so many countries. As an organ donor, Ashley touched at least 6 families with her last life-saving gifts. The family did know within the week of her death that the youngest organ recipient was a little girl who was about to turn 2. So they did very much wonder, who Micah was and why she needed a transplant. And her one kidney went to a friend of theirs. They kind of had asked, do you know anyone who's in need of this, before she actually passed? So they know who got one of her kidneys, and they know Micah. That's they have not connected with anyone else, but they always say that Ashley was super spunky and silly, and Micah is very spunky and very silly. So they love to say that that's thanks to her liver. So we agree with that. But we're so blessed to be connected to their family, and they've kind of adopted Micah as their grandchild and niece and send her ridiculous amounts of things in the mail. And so we will always honor Micah's hero, Ashley. And so another part of our journey is a couple of years after transplant, we just really felt really led to start a nonprofit to give back to families who had experienced and were experiencing what we had. We were so blessed with incredible family and friends and coworkers and our church family who supported us and helped with Olivia. And, we met so many families who are on the same road with not nearly that amount of support. And I felt like I was barely surviving. So the mission of our nonprofit, it's called Pressing On, and our goal really is just to encourage families to know that they are seen and valued and loved, and that they're not alone on their journey. We kind of started Pressing On in a broad sense, and it has continually narrowed itself to serve a lot of families who have pediatric patients and transplant families. But we ship our care packages all over the country to families facing hospitalization with things that we learned along the way were and weren't helpful to be given when you're in the hospital. So we give things like gas gift cards and water bottles. We give meal vouchers to families here at our local hospital, healthy snacks, toiletries. Sometimes we give like a mattress pad that you can fold in half and put on a cot. So you have, and a set of flannel sheets so you can maybe feel a little bit more comfortable and attempt to sleep. We give earplugs and sleep masks and things like that, that we just hope add a tiny bit of potential comfort to a very uncomfortable situation. Our goal ultimately is to build relationships with the families that we meet, and so that they can have a group like we have tonight, that they have someone that they can relate to. And we like to connect families, like one NICU family with another NICU family, just as a connection piece, so that they can become friends and have someone who has walked a similar road as them. And so we say we provide tangible items to ultimately meet intangible needs, because we're all holistic people who have physical, emotional, spiritual needs that we need by being connected to one another. So Pressing On has grown. My husband actually runs it full time now. He resigned from his job 2 years ago and runs it full time. So we love it, and we'd love, if you know anyone who's in the hospital or yourself, we'd love to send you a care package. They're free of charge, and we'd love to support you in that way. So just in closing, for my piece here, Micah is doing well. She is 8. She turned 8 on January 30th and just celebrated 6 years post liver transplant. She enjoys first grade. She plays softball, and she loves to watch Bluey all the time. And her life has just caused me to find joy and gratitude in the everyday moments of life. I was just thinking that tonight she was running over to the playground with my older daughter at the softball field. And there were lots of days I didn't know if she would walk or talk or be able to do any of those things. And so, she drives me crazy sometimes too, just like any kid, but I try to stay focused on just, how grateful we are for all of our kids and their lives. So that's our story. I'll stop rambling, but thank you for letting me share. I guess the last thing I would say is that you can visit our website for Pressing On as well. It's just pressingon.org. And on our website, you can request care packages. You can go to hospital care packages. We have really nice transplant backpacks for transplant families. A donor donated these North Face backpacks that transplant families can have as like a hospital go bag. If you know anyone in the hospital as well, it doesn't have to be a kid or in organic acidemia, we'd be happy to support them. So thanks for letting me share.
Thanks, Regan. I appreciate you sharing your story, and I'm sure others that are either going to watch this at a later time might have questions and can contact you. And your email and contact is all on the website, right?
Correct.
I guess my first question, and I am going to turn off the recording so that we'll just have your presentation and won't have the question and answers.